first up for our lightning talks, we have a double act, Pieter, Lexis, and Wouter de Vries, and they're going to talk to us about tracing and DNS. Please welcome them.
Cool, yeah, we've been told we have to be very quick, so here we go. Pieter, PowerDNS, Wouter, Cloudflare. I think most of us have had these thoughts, like why did I get this answer from my DNS resolver? Why did my query fail? Why was my cache broken? What in the world is the resolver doing? And we didn't have maybe the answer to that. It was difficult to get the logs or anything like that. So the answer to all these problems is obviously tracing, in particular distributed tracing. What is distributed tracing? Basically allows you to stitch together events like logs from separate services by passing along a trace ID, as you can see here. So any of the services in the chain can start with creating a trace ID, and the services that are called in sequence will each emit events using that trace ID. So you can then a centralized service like the trace collector can then stitch them together and give you the view of what happened in your distributed system. We have had this for a long time already, like the HTTP world. In the DNS world, it's much less common. I don't think it's anywhere yet. But we think it's a very good idea. We have it internally at Cloudflare. We also want to have it in the open source world as well.
Yeah, so in order to achieve this, we are putting together a small draft that we're going to submit to the ITF somewhen, mostly to get an EDNS option number from IANA. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take an option where we just stick some data in there, which is the trace ID, so the ID of the trace, the parent ID, because each trace has several spans, and this allows the collector to nicely stitch this all together. And some flags, all of this are defined by the W3C. I can point you to the documentation if you want. Okay, have to be very aggressive with the thing.
So yeah, this is a service that we have, RDNS Origin API. That is when our customers configure, when basically you get an HTTP request in our network, the HTTP daemon asks our service for the origin IP, and if that origin IP is actually a CNAME rather than an IP, we have to do our own recursion. And in the before times, before we had tracing, we would see in the tracing span the query going out as an UDP query, and we'd have like a blind spot for a while, and then it would come back either with an answer that we wanted or not. And now that we have hooked it up to our resolver with the traces, we can actually follow the query as it is getting resolved and doing the actual iterative recursion all the way from the root and to the caches, and you can see everything that's happening and what's taking the longest amount of time for any particular instance. So here you can see, for example, that we talked to some root. You can see what was the query name that we asked and how long it took, and you can see that all the way from the, like if you trace it all the way from the beginning, you can see it all the way from the HTTP request all the way through all of the services and then up to sending the actual queries to the root server. So that gives you a lot of information that would otherwise be very hard to get together if you just have the logs that we already all have, or if you only have Prometheus metrics.
Yeah, and we had a couple of customers and one of our PMs ask about, hey, should we do this? Because we're using OpenTelemetry, which is an open standard, which is very nice. So it integrates very well in any infrastructure. So we started implementing this in DNSdist and the PowerDNS recursor. It's both of them are released now with some initial support for this. So here you see what you can do with this. So this is just DNSdist getting a query, doing a bunch of processing. Delaying it in a rule, and then we pass the query on to the recursor, and then you see neatly stacked underneath in orange, for those who aren't colorblind, I'm sorry about the colors, that the recursor is doing some work, and then it sends back the response to DNSdist that does some extra processing on it. And this is super cool, and yeah, that's it. We would like to ask these to see if the other vendors, open source vendors, would like to implement this, and if anybody has some comments on how we're going to pass the trace IDs around, then please come talk to one of us. So that's it. Thank you.